that you're making mention of, like saying this the end of it being a utopia through racist means. You got to understand how far deep and just deplorable this so-called humanity became with slavery and with everything else that has happened. So, how do we? Because we're talking about getting to a utopia from a pure hell. So, in the midst of coming from this pure hell to get into a utopia, because ultimately, I'm a personal believer that humanity can heal and get to a utopia. I believe that. That's just my personal. But understanding that we're recovering from a global humanity standpoint, from a depth of hell humanity that is just almost indescribable. The things that when you go into the books and really go into the studies of what the researchers have found to actually happen and continues to happen. So to say, okay, the end justifies the means, and this rate, you're healing from racism. You're healing from all of these things. So those are going to be components all the way through because you're healing from it. It's just like with the cancer, with the sickness and so forth. That which is causing the sickness is still present while you're treating it. So those are the things that's like, okay, well, you have to eliminate this in order to, no, those things are going to be there, but they fall off, not fall off. We work them off piece by piece, bit by bit, or bunch by bunch, if possible. But ultimately it's bit by bit because it's in human beings in mass don't just, think about what it takes. Think about what it truly takes. It takes a moon to shift the ocean. It takes a moon, So a human population, all over a global human attitude and global human humanity to move it's going to take something stellar to move it all of a sudden. All of a sudden. No, it's going to be, we're going to have to look at it in increments and understand that, yeah, racism is a part of it. This is it's like you don't look for it. You don't look for these evils to work it out, but the evil is there. And you have to work through those evils. That's just like, these last 4 years. I didn't want
flag your position,
I'm going to go ahead, Adam, and then I'm going to come
let me just flag this really quickly. Yeah. And I'm not sure if Your Highness knows this or not, but Steve, your position is almost fundamentally at odds with Your Highness' position. Your Highness' position thus far has been when people really want to do some shit, they do it overnight. And if it's not, then it's racism.
No, that's
your
not my
position.
Is
almost like
that's not my
that's
position.
How I've sort of perceived it. Was like when motherfuckers want to do some shit, they do it, and if they not, then it's because they don't give a fuck about it. That was kind of a statement that you had mentioned earlier,
yes,
on our previous.
Yeah, along them lines. You're pretty much along them lines, and I don't. It's not. I wouldn't say racist because, I told you about even using the term, but like I know people do what they want to do. I just know that period, regardless of subject in life, people do what they want to do, and people do what they think matters most to them. Whatever they value the most, they're gonna uphold the most. So that's pretty much my position.
Yeah, but I also don't totally disagree with him from the standpoint that because with that process, I believe we move on the process. That when we want to get stuff done, yes, we move on it. Now, how long we have to move, that depends on the point that we're talking. It's like, say, we set it up in benchmarks, as because another thing that I'm hearing a lot of this all or nothing. We either liberated or nothing. It's like that's a process. Liberation, it may not happen in our lifetime. It's a process, But then when you look at it from an all or nothing standpoint, you're not going to move. Because there's no move you can. I don't know of any move. There may be a move. I don't know, but in my perception, I don't see a move that you can make to get a total healing from racism and everything else all at once and all of a sudden. I don't see it.
Yeah, Stephen Covey always says in his work, when it comes to like difficult emotional processes, right? Like slow is fast and fast is slow. And being methodical and like taking the time to have the tough conversations, et cetera. And again, I'm not going to say anything that anyone's going to want to debate where I think we're all on the same page, but I think these things have to take time, unfortunately, because we have to have the tough conversations. We have to
I agree.
have the dialogue and the healing and stuff like that.
You go ahead, Rich.
I know we got Adam, and then I want to.
No, let Richard go because I know you want to say something.
Oh, I don't even be productive, man, because I'm sitting here thinking about the back and forth Adam and Charles were having, and I think the issue is that I don't think it's been clearly defined why it's inherently bad that two groups would be separate, right? Like, and so in my head, I feel, and this is going to sound like, very not intellectual, but like in my heart, I feel like I know why that's bad, but I'm struggling to find the intellectual, or even the language to describe why it's inherently bad that two groups would be separate, and then the outcomes became the same, then it doesn't matter. But in my heart, I do feel like it is a negative thing that they would be separate. So I was trying to find my way in between where Adam and Charles are, and I'm having trouble.
I am too. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you got to understand the separate, because we're looking at the separation at the wrong part of the picture. The separation is at the beginning of the picture, because that's what it was, the separation. Now, the thing is, you're talking about being able to heal from the separation. See, the separation is the diagnosis of the illness. Now, there's some things that need to happen in separate groups because they're separated, because we're looking at it from an integrated standpoint right now. We're here, integration has happened. But before integration, there were some issues that needed to be taking place while segregation was going on, while the groups were so-called separated. Then,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, while the groups were so-called separated. So with that, you're talking about, putting it in this right perspective in the time, so-called timeline. You got separation, and that already happened. Separation was the problem. That's one of the, not the whole of it, but a huge percentage of the actual problem. Now the healing requires coming together, but then you have to heal the part that you cut off from humanity. That part needs to happen, and that's just like in the body. It needs to concentrate on that one area, that one organ, and get it healed and strong, and then from there the coming together. But that didn't happen. It's just you continue attacking that organ.
I have a question for
Steve,
you, Charles.
I agree with you, Steve. I agree with you, and I don't think anyone disagrees. I think there's something more academic at play in the sort of back and forth with myself and Adam, though. Like it's almost like a scenario that isn't based on the real thing that happened. Like what you're saying is 100%.
It's absolutely right, but we're taking a little bit more hypothetical. Yeah,
it's like super hypothetical because. And just to answer Richard's thing, I think the reason that you're in your heart of hearts, you can't academically follow that down is just because we know that it didn't work. So it's hard. Like if you're like, if I throw a rock in the air, we know from seeing it time and time again that it eventually comes down. So it's hard for someone to say, well, hypothetically, if I threw a rock in the air and it never came down, it's just hard in your heart.
I think it's something else I think it's something else though. I don't think that's what it is, Charles. I don't think it's that I don't know. I think there's something more inherent in it that's wrong, more than just because we haven't seen it work before. So let me ask you a question. We talked about the Tuskegee experiment and means versus motivations. Why is that one wrong for you? Why is that one wrong? That scenario?
Because there was harm. Because there was harm in the means. The means harmed people. So you can't have a study that's based on let's make the world a better place, but let's harm this group of people that we've got here. This is the same reason I don't like the idea of animal testing products or anything else. I want a shampoo that doesn't burn my eyes, but I don't want to burn bunny eyes to find out.
But don't you think motivations in and of themselves can be harmful? If your motivation is ill, right? The means behind your, I think these two things are a little bit linked together, motivation and means. Can't your motivations be
your means will be determined maybe by your means could be determined by your motivation, right? If you don't give a shit about black people, right? And I think I'm going to prove your point here, then achieve my outcome than if I did, right? So if the CEO of Pepsi, right, doesn't give a fuck about black people, and he wants to sell more Coke, he might be willing to test, I don't know, this market or this product. And so that kind of brings it home to prove your point. So you're right. Motivations matter, which I
think that's what's going on, Matt.
But
so I think that's what I was trying to get to, but I was having a hard time
bringing it home. It was worth it because, and again, motivations matter, man. I don't want to sell it to you guys that motivation doesn't matter. There's something very effective about knowing what the outcome you want to change is, and affecting change through process.
But I do think to go back to how we've kind of brought a full circle, to get to that point, we have to understand how the motivation impacts the means with which we're trying to accomplish that end goal that we all know that we want to get to.
If I didn't think we'd get bogged down and waste so much time, I would love to go back to the DeSantis situation, but
this is a good combo because you're really pushing me. I'm really thinking through this thing right now. It was helpful for me.
But at the end of the day, you're right. So I don't want to waste any more time on it. Motivations matter. So I think for us to push any further, and let's just go on the phone separately after this. Because we'll go down the academic rabbit hole and the philosophical rabbit hole. I want to stay on the subject we got at hand. Although we did seem to lose Your Highness, so I'm not entirely sure where you guys want to go from here.
Did you have another topic?
Also,
I'm getting picked up at 3. I got some time.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I got a text.
Yeah, I've got about 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's about the same.
Okay. Let's circle back to something election related, because I know that was supposed to be the theme of today's call. Does anybody have a wish list in terms of the administration that we have right now, or maybe a prioritization list that's relevant to sort of the subject matter that we have at hand?
Policy wise, or I know one yesterday, I remember thinking after everything, and a bunch of pundits online talking everything. I remember thinking I would like, and I kind of go back and forth with this, and I think we touched on this before. I think reconciliation is needed right now, right? We things are going crazy. We gotta we gotta change our course. And I remember thinking, what would what would that look like? What did those actions look like? And I think having I don't know if you've ever read Team of Rivals by Doris Kern, but she goes through Lincoln's presidency, and he talks about how he built this team of rivals, right? That's the name of the book, Team of Rivals. And when I remember thinking maybe something like that is needed, right? A cabinet that's made up of these people with these different ideological leanings, so that we can get back into this zone of actually working together and compromising to get to our end goals. And the only reason I hesitate saying that is because I think about these last years, they've just been ramming it down your throat, right? So you're just kind of oh, now you want to talk peace now, But then,
which to Richard's point, is how we stay sleeping. We're here, let's all hold hands now.
Right. Dog, but then part of me is
always been of the mind.
Part of me is we got to be better though, right? The whole point is to get to this better place, and we won't ever get there if we're continuing well, they did it, we're going to do it. We're going to come back at you. We're going to pack the court. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And I'm but then next 4 years when it's flipped, we're going to be going through the same thing. It's going to keep, we got to meet in this middle ground. And it's hard for me to even say that, because I'm a wildly progressive person, right? I'm far left. And so saying that means that a lot of the things that I believe in probably won't get done. But at some level, the reconciliation's almost a little bit more important right now to me, right? This cooling down of everything. It's like, yes, I want universal health care, and yes, I want, all of these different things, but man, I just want it to be like some sense of normalcy right now. And I think the best way to do that might be to like include, like, I'm not saying go out and get like Eric Trump Jr. and put him on the cabinet, right? Like, I'm not saying that, but like reaching across to like, someone like Mitt Romney or someone like John Cushing or even someone like Nikki Haley, and bringing some of like these slightly more Nikki Haley was
the better example. Yeah,
like slightly more like middle centrist, because like people say, like, America is mostly centrist, right? Like, it's mostly that 25 to 75, and I know that I'm very aware that I'm on the other end of the 25 on the liberal side, but if we get like people in this range in a room talking, I feel like we'll be able to get to things that like everybody can live with for the most part. And I feel like that's just kind of where we need to be right now. Instead of like, sorry, go ahead.
What do you risk if
I know.
I get it? Because in theory,
it's a gamble.
I know.
I deeply appreciate your position, and you know that I feel the same way. But what do you risk with? And like, I hate to use like the presidency as like this like valuable asset, but what do you risk over the next 4 years if you take that approach and you end up just having a bunch of conversation and you miss opportunities to move the middle in a real way if you don't take that approach? And and I don't have the answer. I'm just asking the question because I feel like it's important to define that in our position.
I think you have
I think it's worth the risk, man.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, right? You have to think about what the risk reward is, right? And like what the quantum of damages are on both ends of this, right? Like how bad is it going to get if we don't actually start reconciling, right? Like
if we could right now, we have the opportunity to treat the Trump administration not as like the most recent example of what the Republican Party did, but instead as a fluke.
Right.
Because if we take this next 4 years and we try to pack the courts and we try to gut the judicial system and we try to fucking gerrymander, the rest of the future away, then now that's it. Now we know.
See, but the only thing for me is like, I feel like we always do that though. Like,
that's been a societal thing. That's been a societal thing, and I made mention of it in a previous conversation. The opposite extreme is rarely the answer, rarely the solution. Well, you did this, and so I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. And you still haven't created any balance. You haven't created any respect. So, I like the idea of the conversation, but put the conversation in the standpoint of, okay, you have the conversation based on developing a vision, developing plans. But there's some things that are so damaged right now that you have to like, okay, we need to move on this right away. There's certain items that we say, okay, there's no discussion on this aspect. Like, for instance, COVID, things that need to happen there, healthcare, the people who, some kind of stimulus, those things need to just move. But then you have from a healing standpoint from what happened, bringing in, like you said, both left and right to conversate so that you can develop projections. We develop things that say, okay, this is how we can start to heal. This is how we can start bringing together the nation and so forth and so on and so forth. And like we said before, now that we say it, what are the incremental steps that can come out of the conversation?
Yeah, and I could think of a bipartisan. So Adam, you and I just described like two sort of polarizing strategies, right? Like one is do them how they did us and try to pack the courts, et cetera, right? Or, all right, like, let's all just try to get along now and hope to God that when they win, they don't fucking just pack the courts again and just set us back for life. I think there's a middle ground, right? Where we like coming together with a policy that says like, you know what? Instead of us trying to pack the court, we want to pass legislation this year that says no presidency gets to put more than 2 justices in. Even if 3 die on your watch, then the Speaker of the House, that is a Democratic majority or whatever, or the opposition, they get to put them in.
Or term limits, or term limits, right? If you have unlimited, you can't serve more than 10 years.
Right, but you can create a framework that is just less partisan, that basically is more resistant to bullshit happening, like what happened.
But I do think that I think that's closer to coming to like that reconciliation point, though, right? Like that's. But yes, there are lots of ways to like accomplish that reconciliation, and I think that's one of them. That's a pretty good example of a way to do that. I just I stop and I pause sometimes because I have to like realize like I'm a relatively progressive person and I have my own echo chamber and my own bubble. And I want to make sure that I'm not looking at this through like some crazy skewed lens of like, a crazy progressive liberal where I'm like, I feel like, don't we already try to do that and get punched in the face for it? Like on a regular basis? Or I'm like, am I being progressive? Am I being that guy? And I'm saying like, I'm like skewed, right? And I'm like, oh, we're not actually doing it to them, right? Like, meaning like in their eyes, we're not doing that. And we're the ones that are ramming it down their throats, right? And I'm like, but like, I do feel that way at times. I'm like, we do try this, right? We do try to work with you and we do try to do this, but like, it doesn't work. Like, think about like back in the Obama era when, what's that guy's name? John
Bonner?
Banner or Bonner, whatever.
Bonner,
when he would try to come across the aisle and talk to Obama, he got like, forgive me for the without using a better word, like he would get like lynched for that, right? Like, and he was like trying to work on just for like talking with the man.
John Bonner was getting crucified.
Yeah, he was getting crucified just for like talking.
And he was trying.
With the other side.
He was trying.
And I'm
there's
like,
a whole documentary about that though.
Yeah, and it's really just like those Tea Party years, right? Yeah, I actually saw that one too. It's actually really good on the Tea Party years. So I'm like, okay, part of me is like, yes, I do want to reconcile. I want to meet in the middle, like make an America that works for everybody. Obviously, I want that, right?
Yeah.
But am I going to do that? And in 4 years, someone punch me in the face for it? And then like, oh, word, thanks for that. But here's like 4 more conservative judges, and here's this, and here's that, and here's that. Good luck. Sit with that over there, Chief.
You gotta have faith sometimes, though. I think, man.
I know,
Richard.
Yeah, you gotta have faith, but you gotta look at reputation too.
No, I was just gonna say, having not moved the middle at all, right? And then, to your point, Adam, it would have been then 8 years of moving in the direction that is not in line with how you think about things. And so, I don't. With that.
It's tough. It's a big pill to swallow, right? Like for someone who's like on the other end a little bit, you're like, hey, I want to reconcile, but like, we're not even remotely moving to where I want to be. But like, I'm putting the betterment of like the country and everyone's feelings before the fact that the things that I actually want and think will be better for people, like those policies aren't going to be pushed. And I have to like eat that. But if I'm eating that and you're going to turn around and slap me in the face, my next reaction is going to be pack the hell out of this court. It's going to be such a violent reaction to this, right? So it's like I just feel like it has to be a legitimate reconciliation on both sides, or it's going to get ugly.
But something that I'm looking at too, we can look at that, pose it as a question. Moving forward, because of just the shift from norm or just the insanity of the last 4 years. Does this administration take on itself, or do we as Americans look at how do we prevent things from going so far out of whack? Because ultimately he did things that were
legal.
Exactly, legal.
That was my point.
There were no consequences to it. So how do it's like? So do we now look at it from the standpoint of how do we preserve what we have, and prevent from what happened, without just like locking down the next president's saying that okay, now you have no latitude. You can only move here, you can only move there. And to where the leadership is this like so tight because you're trying to prevent what happened through the Trump years.
I think both Adam and Charles, you guys are saying this, that you do have to have the faith. I don't remember who gave the statistics, but 75, most of us, operate in the 75 to 25. If that's true, then you have to have faith that most people are going to acknowledge and recognize that sort of reconciliation and subscribe. And when I mean subscribe, I mean like vote and participate in their civic duty with that same mindset, because the alternative, like the hard swing one way and then the pendulum going that far the other way, is
someone gets knocked out eventually.
It's so dangerous that you have to have faith that the people who are more leaning on this side in that 75 to 25 recognize your attempt to reconcile and act accordingly.
My only pause with that, or my thought on it, is that like the difference between the left and the right on this is that the left really hasn't been taken over by the super far left, right? Like it's getting much, much stronger, right? Much, much stronger, right? You've got,
conservatives don't agree with you.
Yeah, I was about to say the right would not. The right,
and maybe that's right. Maybe they don't, but yeah, I mean, but like Trump owns their party right now, right? Like this is actually a really good example of it with this whole election fraud thing. You can't even get people to really come out, like a lot of Republicans to come out and be like, guys, like a couple are coming out and they're like, it's over. But like the big ones that you need to be like, come to, like Jake Tapper made this example where he talked about when the whole Nixon thing came up and how, these 2 or 3 Republicans came to Nixon, spoke with the base and came to Nixon. And he was like, hey man, you don't have the support of the Republican Party anymore. Like, this is all like fuck shit, apparently, pretty much.
For lack of
to be eloquent, this is fuck shit. I'm pretty sure that's an exact quote, right? Pretty sure that's an exact quote. And like that's not happening right now, or at least if it is, we don't know it, right? Or there's no reason to think that it is. And I feel like this election's a really good example of that, right? Like you look at the left when it looked like Bernie was going to win. What happened? The actual party stepped in. They were like, "Yo, like,
look, bro."
They're like, "Nah, man. Like,
cool
you know what I mean? Like, and
we're not about to roll with this."
And here's the thing: I was pro Bernie, but I recognized what happened. Right? They came out. They're like, "Nah, son. Like, come on. We're tripping right now. Let's get this in line." And what happened? Boom, boom, boom. Went back to like the more centrist, side of the left party, which is Biden, right? That hasn't happened in the past 4 years. In fact, quite the opposite. Anybody who has been in that centrist lane that spoke up has been either ostracized, kicked out. Only the ones that are like too big to really get it. Like Mitt Romney's a little bit too big for it, so they can't do it to him. But
they couldn't gut him. Yeah,
a lot of these guys, they're just getting cut off, and the base knows it for political. I mean, these politicians know that their futures rely on that extreme. They rely on it. That's one of the reasons they're not coming out now, right? They're like, I can't alienate that crazy base because that crazy base is voting, and I need that vote. And where Donald Trump didn't align with them and like kind of like toss some of these like some of these representatives to the side, they didn't win, right? They didn't get those votes. They didn't get that extra boost. So we don't have that on our side, really, right? And I think part of that's tied to Trump because he's so like extreme that like people on the far left like, I don't care who you put out there, man, we gonna vote against this dude, right? But we don't have that to the same extent as they do. We were able to bring ourselves back when it came down to it, back to like that center, which again was not where I am, but I recognized what was happening. That's not happening. Yeah. That's not happening. It's not happening over there. It's just it's not happening right now, right? Like right this second, it's not.
No,
happening.
I know, it's wild.
So that doesn't give me confidence that like if Biden comes and he starts reaching across the aisle and he's like, "Come on, man, let's get this back to the middle, let's get this back to the center." And I'm like, what happens when that far left, right, the Matt Gaetzes of the world, come out and they're like, pushing this other side, and they've got like these big constituencies behind them. And what happens when we can't get to the middle? Now what? And those kind of sackless, moderate Republicans aren't stepping up to the plate. They're not coming up. Like, you got the Mitt Romneys and stuff that do it, kind of halfy sometimes, but they do it somewhat. What happens when that happens? Then we have been slapped in the face.